On Christmas Eve 1974, the Soviet Union invaded neighbouring Afghanistan in an effort to secure the nation as a stable Soviet communist ally. The opposition to this atheist, godless superpower coalesced in the Holy Warriors, mujahideen. The United States saw an opportunity to oppose the Soviets, and CIA covert action worked through the Pakistani intelligence services to reach Afghani rebel groups. The war inspired many throughout the Muslim world to their Islamic duty to defend their brothers from this imperialist invasion. One such man was a Saudi Arabian Osama bin Laden, born to a billionaire family and a multi-millionaire by inheritance. In his words, quote, "I felt outraged that an injustice had been committed against the people of Afghanistan." He co-founded the Afghan Services Bureau, bringing fighters from the Arab world and funding their expenses to get to Pakistan, be organised, and then fight with the Afghans, also working with Pakistani ISI. From 1979 to 1992, the United States, Saudi Arabia, and China provided between $6 and $12 billion worth of financial aid and weapons to tens of thousands of holy warriors through Pakistan's inter-service intelligence. Bin Laden claimed, quote, "Personally, neither I nor my brothers saw evidence of American help," which is entirely believable, given the amount of Arab money that was pouring in, particularly from Saudi Arabia. As the Soviets withdrew, bin Laden would end up splitting with his Afghan Services Bureau colleagues who wanted to integrate Arab fighters into Afghan units. Rather, bin Laden's vision was of Arab Islamist units. To that end, he would create the Foundation, Al-Qaeda, a secret organization funded with bin Laden's money. The Foundation would become the fighters for the word of God on which new Islamic states could be birthed and then combined into an Islamic empire, caliphate. After bin Laden and his brothers became victorious in the Soviet-Afghan war, he would return to Saudi Arabia a hero, a rich boy who gave it all up to fight the enemy, no matter whomever and wherever. It can obviously be seen as an incredibly inspiring story, especially given the contrast to the decadent Saudi royal family at the time. Plus, his Arab Legion had openly defeated the Soviets in battle, but for now it was back to working for the family bin Laden Group construction firm. Yet he also decided to make political moves that would piss off the king, such as proposing to send his fighters to overthrow the Soviet South Yemen, which was declined. So he organised assassinations of communists without state backing and had to be stopped and reminded there was Saudi foreign policy, not bin Laden foreign policy. Then Saddam Hussein invaded and annexed Kuwait. The Saudi kingdom was naturally worried he might keep going with his notions of pan-Arabism. Less than 1,000 National Guard stood between him and control over more than 50% of the entire world's oil supply. Maybe even the population would overthrow the royal family, sick of the decadence they displayed. The king signed an agreement with the United States for the US military to be stationed in Arabia. The US also wanted to use it as a stepping stone to remove Saddam from Kuwait. 1 week later, bin Laden would personally meet with the king and defense minister, telling them not to depend on crusaders in the holiest lands of Islam, and offered his Arab Legion to help defend against Saddam. When the defense minister asked how they would fight against chemical and biological weapons, bin Laden responded with, quote, "We will fight them with faith." His offer was rejected. Non-Muslims are not allowed to enter the holy cities of Medina and Mecca. When the French special forces were called in to liberate the Grand Mosque seizure, they had to convert to Islam before the raid. Having an enormous army of non-Muslims occupying Arabian land, he saw as a betrayal of the proper respect a Muslim should give to Islam. Bin Laden publicly denounced non-Muslims being in the peninsula, and tried to convince the Islamic scholars to issue rulings against the American deployment, but they refused out of fear. At the end of that year, a Foundation operative associate's home was raided by the FBI. Syed Nusser had evidence of terrorist plots, including the blowing up of New York skyscrapers. After having his movement confined to his city, bin Laden decided to flee first to Afghanistan but then to Sudan, who was allowing any Muslim in visa-free. Naturally, hundreds of Islamic fighters took up the offer. Around this time, the Empire of Evil collapses, to which bin Laden can also claim prestige. Bin Laden wastes no time in Sudan. The Sudanese government love this wealthy Arab investing in the new state's infrastructure, whilst he can build up his military force, giving them jobs in his investments. The Foundation were also issued new orders. Shiite and Sunni should work together, US troops in Arabia, Yemen, and the Horn of Africa should be attacked. This time in Sudan would mark the change from the Foundation being war fighters to terrorists. To understand the change from some kind of private Islamic military to terrorist organization, you have to understand these Islamists' ideological hero, Sayyid Qutb. He was an Egyptian who visited the United States only to find a country devoid of faith and morals. One of these strangest encounters is at a university with a female professor. Quote, "The issue of sexual relationships is simply biological. You Orientals complicate this simple matter by introducing a moral element to it. The stallion and the mare, the bull and the cow, the ram and the ewe, the rooster and the hen, none of them consider moral consequences when they have intercourse, and therefore life goes on, simple, easy and carefree." Sayyid would return to Egypt, despising the West, as a model for the Muslim world to get itself out of a position of subjugation, and assert that for the Islamic world to be in a place of dominance again, they must restore Islam as central to their lives and governance. This also leads to the idea of any Muslim ruler who ruled under man-made laws rather than God's law, Islamic law, and did not form an Islamic government based on Islamic law, was a fake Muslim, an apostate, a crime in Islam punishable by death. The Foundation also figured that any innocents who were killed will be sent to God, and if they were good Muslims, they would be sent to heaven anyway. The first Foundation attack would be a hotel bombing in Yemen, failing to kill any US soldiers. Following the bombing, Sudan would be placed on the US list of sponsors of terrorism. 2 months later, the World Trade Center is bombed by a Foundation-trained terrorist. Later that year, 18 US soldiers are killed in Somalia by militants trained by the Foundation. US intelligence find at least 3 terrorist training camps run by Bin Laden in Sudan, and Saudi Arabia revokes his citizenship and freezes his assets. Egyptian Islamic Jihad then tried to assassinate the Egyptian president. The majority of Foundation members are also EIJ members, and it is unlikely Bin Laden was not involved. After this ramp-up in terrorist attacks, Sudan, under pressure from the United States, finally agreed to deport Bin Laden. Saudi Arabia would not take him, however, so he was forced to leave for Afghanistan. In these negotiations, Sudan agreed to hand over Bin Laden to the United States if it wanted to bring charges against him, but the United States so far had no evidence that he had harmed US citizens, so said no. US officials are quoted as saying, "Ask him to leave the country, just don't let him go to Somalia," to which a Sudanese general warned, "He will go to Afghanistan. Let him," the Americans responded. Bin Laden would lose millions of dollars worth of equipment and property in Sudan, but then had nothing to do but make friends with the Taliban, whose name means students, obviously, of the Islamic prophet Muhammad, who conquered all of Arabia for the faith he founded. By this time, the Clinton administration had noticed the threat he faced to the United States, and President Clinton signed a top-secret order that authorized the CIA to use any and all means to destroy Bin Laden's network. Now in Afghanistan, Bin Laden issued the Declaration of Jihad against Americans, with 2 major complaints labelled at Saudi Arabia. Number 1, its suspension of the rulings of Islamic law and the replacement thereof with man-made laws. Number 2, its inability to protect the lands and its allowing the enemies of God to occupy it for years in the form of the American Crusaders. With a saying from the Islamic prophet to justify future terrorism, quote, "The martyr has a guarantee from God. He forgives him at the first drop of his blood and shows him his seat in heaven. He decorates him with the jewels of faith, protects him from the torment of his grave, keeps him safe on the day of judgment, places a crown of dignity upon his head with the finest rubies in the world, marries him to 72 of the pure virgins of paradise, and intercedes on behalf of 70 of his relatives." The head of Saudi intelligence, Prince Turki, then visited the Taliban leader Mullah Omar and gets him to agree to hand over Bin Laden in principle. However, Bin Laden then pledges his allegiance to Omar. Omar then betrays the deal, calling Saudi Arabia an occupied state. 2 years later, the Foundation bombed US embassies in Kenya and Tanzania, killing 12 US nationals and hundreds of locals. A $5 million reward is made for Bin Laden by the United States. In response, President Clinton ordered the use of cruise missiles to strike Bin Laden-related targets in Sudan and Afghanistan. The Sudanese target was a harmless pharmaceutical factory, and the Afghan missiles failed to kill Bin Laden, making him an international symbol of anti-American resistance. A young suspicious Uzbek was then arrested by the Taliban, who confessed that the Saudis had hired him to assassinate bin Laden. In 1998, the CIA counterterrorism force briefed the president that the Foundation are planning to attack the United States, including training personnel to hijack aircraft. The CIA had obtained photographs of a Foundation meeting in Malaysia. The CIA failed to put their names on terror watch lists. Since then, two operatives had made their way into the US, and the CIA had failed to inform the FBI, who could have easily placed them under surveillance and learned of the USS Cole plot and 9/11. In October 2000, Foundation militants in Yemen bombed the USS Cole, killing 17 American personnel and injuring 37 others. The Foundation then decides this is going so well, the time has come to attack the United States itself. Enter stage left Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. Khalid had previously created Operation Bojinka, the main aspect being the planting of bombs on 13 airliners set for days after when they were planted, the result being planes filled with people simultaneously being blown out of the sky on major airways, killing an estimated 5,000 people. This plot did get as far as a test bombing with reduced yield, which only killed one person. Khalid had laid out a similar plan to bin Laden in 1996, and eventually joined the Foundation. Khalid's initial plan was to hijack several planes from the west and east coast, and fly them into several targets. Bin Laden wanted to simplify the plot and took control and offered the finances. His men would pick the hijackers and Khalid would arrange the travel and list of proposed targets. Mohammed Atta was chosen as the leader. Egyptian-born and German-educated, he could find others with experience of the West and English skills needed to operate in the United States. Soon he met with bin Laden to pick the targets. Quote, "He met with bin Laden to discuss the targets. The World Trade Center, which represented the US economy, the Pentagon, as a symbol of the US military, and the US Capitol, the perceived source of US policy and support for Israel. The White House was also on the list, as bin Laden considered it a political symbol and wanted to attack it as well, with orders to crash the planes if the pilots could not find their targets. The White House seems to eventually have been dropped as a consideration due to it being much harder to find from a plane. The candidates were slowly picked and then trained in hijacking and flight roles as needed, then moved to the United States on legal visas when the time came. On the 5th of July 2001, Dick Clark, the National Coordinator for Counterterrorism, assembled representatives of various domestic agencies. The Federal Aviation Administration, the Immigration and Naturalization Service, the Coast Guard, the FBI, and Secret Service amongst them, to issue a warning. Quote, "Something really spectacular is going to happen here, and it's going to happen soon." Only on August 23rd, 2001, was the FBI notified that Foundation operatives from the Malaysia meeting were in the country. One angry FBI agent, Steve Bungard, could not contain his anger. Quote, "Dina, you've got to be kidding me," he said. "Mithar is in the country? If this guy is in the country, it's not because he's going to f***ing Disneyland." The CIA, not wanting to leak information, refused to provide anything more, putting up a wall. Quote, "Someday, somebody will die, and wall or not, the public will not understand why we are not more effective and throwing every resource we have at certain problems," Steve responded. He was not the only agent to be frustrated with the intelligence world's showing of a serious lack of care about the threat posed by the Foundation. One such man was John O'Neill, who had spent the last 5 years working on solving cases of various terrorist attacks bin Laden was involved in. He was seen as obsessed with the growing threat of bin Laden and the Foundation, but internal strife led him to retiring from the Bureau, the day before they were notified Foundation members were in the country, and took up the job of Chief of Security for the World Trade Center. He would die trying to save people from the consequences of the threat he spent so long warning about.
Nobody move, please. We are going back to the airport. Don't try to make any stupid moves. We have some planes. Just stay quiet and you'll be okay. We are heading to the airport.
Cockpit's not answering. Somebody's stabbed in business class. And I think there's mates that we can't breathe. I don't know. I think we're getting hijacked.
What is your name?
Okay, my name is Betty Ong. I'm number 3 on flight 11.
American Airlines emergency line. Please state your emergency.
Hey, this is Nitty, American Airlines calling. I am monitoring a call in which Flight 11, the flight attendant is advising our reps that the pilot, everyone's been stabbed. What's going on, Betty? Betty, talk to me. Betty, are you there? Betty? Winston, do you think you lost her? Okay, so we'll stay open. I think we might have lost her.
Lieutenant Tower reports that there was a fire at the World Trade Center. And that's the area where we lost the airplane.
Bobby Jones seemed to think that the guy said that we have planes. Now, I don't know if it was because it was the accent or if there's more than one, but I'm gonna reconfirm that for you, and I'll get back to you real quick, okay?
Appreciate it.
Yes, what? Planes as in plural.
Jules, this is Ryan. Lives on an airplane that's been hijacked. If things will go well, I'm good to go. I just want you to know I absolutely love you. I want you to do good. So happy to find. Same to my parents and everybody. And I just totally love you, and I'll see you later, sir. Bye, babe. I'll call you.
There's another aircraft?
The second one just hit the trade center.
Okay. Yeah, we gotta alert the military real quick on this.
United 1523, did you hear your company, did you hear some interference on the frequency here a couple of minutes ago, screaming?
Yes, I did, 797, and we couldn't tell what it was either.
Okay. United 93, Cleveland, if you hear the center right then.
An American 1060, a ditto on the other transmission.
The American 1060, you heard that also?
Yes, sir, twice.
Roger, we heard that also, thanks. I just wanted to confirm it wasn't some interference.
Tuesday, 9:47 a.m.
Hi, baby. Baby, you have to listen to me carefully. I'm on a plane that's been hijacked. I'm on the plane. I'm calling from the plane. I want to tell you I love you. Please tell my children that I love them very much. And I'm so sorry, babe. I don't know what to say. There's 3 guys. They've hijacked the plane. I'm trying to be calm. We're turned around, and I've heard that there's planes that's been flown into the World Trade Center. I hope to be able to see your face again, baby. I love you. Bye.
End of message.
United 93, have you got information on that yet?
Yeah, he's down.
He's down?
Yes.
When did he land? Because we have confirmation.
He did not land.
Oh, he's down?
Yeah,
Down?
somewhere up northeast of Camp David. You need to read this. Region Commander has declared that we can shoot down tracks that do not respond to our direction. Okay. I'll pass out the weapons. Okay. The Region Commander has declared that we can shoot down aircraft that do not respond to our direction. Copy that?
Copy that, sir.
So if you're trying to divert somebody and he won't divert,
PO's saying no.
no? Came over the chat. Fox, you got a conflict on that? You got a conflict on that direction?
Right now, no, but...
Okay. Okay. You read that from the Vice President, right? Vice President has cleared.
Vice President has cleared us to intercept tracks of interest, shoot them down if they do not respond first on our CC. Okay, the direction of protecting the major centers, when you're overhead the major center, being Pittsburgh in this case, you have intercept authority on any traffic in the area, and if traffic does not respond to hand signals, divert procedures, anything like that, and they continue to press in a threatening manner towards the major center, you're cleared to engage.
We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them.
The American public had been riding a high as the remaining superpower of the Cold War. Few could imagine an attack so close to home by terrorists so far removed from the major US interests. The public understandably wanted revenge, but with no one surviving to hang, this national frustration is viewed as taking its toll on Afghanistan and Iraq. The United States would demand Bin Laden's extradition from Afghanistan as a major suspect of 9/11. The students refused, leading to the invasion and 20-year occupation that ended with little gain besides the killing of Bin Laden. In Pakistan, an alleged US ally, Iraq would provide evidence to Bin Laden's claims that the Muslim world was now at war with the West, and provided al-Zarqawi a chance to set up Al-Qaeda in Iraq, pledging allegiance to Bin Laden, actualizing the birth of the decentralized global jihadist movement, which would eventually lead to the Islamic State after Bin Laden's death. What about that Iraqi oil? The United States was the largest export market for Iraq before the war, and would continue to be until 2013. Ever since, more Iraqi oil has gone to China than the United States. And this is incredibly unsatisfying, which is likely why 9/11 became such a target for conspiracy theories. People wondering what really happened on 9/11.
Who had the most to gain from 9/11? Kyle! Who was nowhere to be found the morning the towers fell? Kyle!
There are many a loose end. However, many of them are easy to dismiss. The Foundation did not claim responsibility at first. However, this was typical of them. And also, given the universal condemnation, this is not really a surprise, but they eventually did. There is also the classic, jet fuel can't melt steel beams, bro, but equally the classic debunk that steel becomes bendy when hot. What about the Pentagon plane? Why are there so little remains of a plane? Firstly, the Pentagon was built during World War II. Thanks to the steel shortage, it is largely made of concrete, and concrete is exceptionally good at shredding aircraft, as demonstrated by the protective covers of nuclear plants for just such a possibility. Never to mention the remains of the plane you can actually find. There are other such petty conspiracies. In my research, I only found 2 interesting anomalies. First, Tower number 7, the tower that was reported collapsed live on TV when it hadn't.
Now, more on the latest building collapse in New York. You might have heard a few moments ago I was talking about the Salomon Brothers building collapsing. And indeed it has. Apparently that's only a few hundred yards away from where the World Trade Center towers were. Jane, what more can you tell us about the Salomon Brothers building and its collapse?
Well, only really what you already know. Details are very, very sketchy. They see these huge clouds of smoke and ash, and we know that behind that there's an empty piece of what was a very familiar New York skyline.
The BBC actually addressed this in a blog post in 2007, saying, quote, "We no longer have the original tapes of our 9/11 coverage, for reasons of cock-up, not conspiracy. So if someone has got a recording of our output, we'd love to get hold of it." Well, as you can see, that footage did turn up. Further investigation by the BBC led them to blame their failures on Reuters, quote, "The Reuters news agency had mistakenly reported the collapsing of the building, which is also picked up by CNN, just before the live report. Reuters later issued a correction, but clips of the report continued to go viral in the days leading up to the 9/11 anniversaries." I could not find a version of the original Reuters report, but the obvious next question would be how they could make such a mistake. Yet, given the chaos and the collapsing towers whose debris would bring down Tower 7, the most likely explanation is miscommunication. And secondly, dancing Israelis. 5 men were arrested on September the 11th, 2001, after celebrating the attack, quote, high-fiving and jumping. They were detained and searched, and the police found maps of the city with certain places highlighted, box cutters, $4,700 in cash stuffed into a sock, and foreign passports. The FBI discovered that 2 of the men, Sivan Kurtzberg and Paul Kurtzberg, were Mossad agents. The 5 men were ultimately released without charge and argued their behavior was simply immature behavior, the dark humor of these kinds of circles being the only given explanation. There is nothing really else about the 9/11 conspiracies I find particularly interesting, but if you would like to know more about the ideology and the steps that led to 9/11, I would recommend The Looming Tower, which helped inspire this script. But you may be interested to know that, of course, some Serbians decided to make a song saying America deserved 9/11.
Ameriko, dobila si svoje, oko Kosova i krajine